Hey guys, in this video I will show you how to make the look dev with Redshift for the coral scenes created by Philip for us last week, so let's dive in. So here I have a main geo container with the coral setup, and here I have my end corals and the end rocks. So first I will copy my null for the corals. So let's copy this one with Ctrl+C. Then you can go back to the object level and I will add a new geometry container. So in that case, I have one geometry container for the corals and one geometry container for the rocks. So let's add the first one. And here you can rename it render corals. So you can dive inside and here you can add an object merge. So in that case, we can import the corals into this new geometry container. So here under the object one, you can paste the null that we have copied before. And now you can copy and paste this new geometry container and you can rename it render rocks. So now you can go back to the main container to take the rocks object. So you can copy these nulls and you can paste it under this render rocks under the object merge. So you can delete this one and you can replace it with the rocks object. So in that case, we have these two objects. We have the corals and we have the rocks in two separated geometry containers. So now let's add a floor. So to do that, let's add a new geometry container and here you can rename it render floor. So now you can dive inside and here you can add a grid. So if you want, you can make the rocks and the coral visible. So you can click on these little icons and you can make a ghost other object. So in that case, we have a little preview of the scenes. So for the grid, I will keep it by default at 10 by 10. So here I will just add the UV unwrap and the normals and that's it. So now let's create a camera. And here for the camera, you can go to the view tab to change the resolution of your camera. But in my case, I will take the preset 1080. So now I can select my camera and move it around the scene. So to do that, you can select the camera under these little icons and you can select the camera 1. And here you can click on this little lock icon to move the camera on the scenes. So you can press H to center the camera and then you can place it as you want. So in my case, I will place it to something like here. Of course, if you want, you can also change the focal length. But in my case, I will keep it by default at 50. So now as the camera is correctly placed on the scene, we can disable this little lock icon. In that case, we can keep the camera on these positions. So you can disable the lock icon here. So now let's create the different materials. So let's add the material network. And here you can rename it something like RS mat. And you can dive inside and here you can create the different material for the scene. So we need one material for the floor, one material for the rocks and one material for the corals. So let's add a new RS material builder. And here we can create a material for the corals, we can create a new material for the rocks, and we can create a new material for the floor. So let's assign those different materials to the different object of the scene. So you can go back to the object level, and here you can dive into the corals object. And to assign the material, you can add the material subnode. And here for this object, we want to assign the corals materials. So you can select the material by clicking on these little icons. And here you can go to the object, and here you have your material network. So in my case, I've called it RS mats. And here I can select my corals materials. So I can click on accept and now you can see the object become white on the scenes. So that means the material is correctly applied on this object. So now I can dive inside my rocks object and here we can add a new material subnode. And here for this one, we can add the rocks materials. So you can click on that and you can select the rocks materials. So now you can see the rocks become white. And now you can go to the floor object and let's add a material node. And here you can select the floor materials. So now for the material preview, I will add an RS DOM. And here for the DOM, you can select an HDRI map. So here you can select the DOM, you can go to the light tab, and here you can select a texture. So you can click on this little icon to select your texture. So in my case, I will use this one from HDRI Heaven. You can download it for free. And here I will put the saturation to 0 and I will keep everything else by default. So this light DOM is only for the material preview and later we can create the lightning with area lights. So now we can start the render view. You can open a new window and here you can click on the plus icons and you can open the Redshift render view. So now you can click on play. So now you can see we have our scenes, so we can dive into the rock materials and we can create the rocks material first. So here for the rocks materials, I use a PBR texture from Ambient CG and you can download some rocks for free here on the website. So I will put the link in the description so you can choose one of these. So here we want to use those texture for the rocks materials. So first let's add an RS texture node.
Most Houdini tutorials show you tricks. Very few teach you how to build real, production-ready setups from scratch. Artilabs is a premium Houdini training platform for artists who want production-level results, used in motion design, simulations, and high-end product visuals. You get 45+ hours of advanced content, including 2 complete courses where you build high-end animations from start to finish, exactly like in real client work. Every lesson includes full Houdini project files, so you're never guessing. You follow the exact workflow step by step. The library keeps growing every month. And right now, annual access is discounted with an extra 20% off for a limited time. Click the link below. Start building Houdini work that actually attracts professional clients.
So here we want to add 5 texture nodes. So this one is for the colors. This one is for the ambient occlusions. This one is for the roughness. This one is for the bump, and this one is for the displacement. So now we can import each individual textures into the texture node. So first, let's import the ambient occlusions. So to select the texture, you can click on these little icons, and here you can go to the $heap. Under the text folder, I have my different textures. So let's open this one. For this one, you can open the color textures. For this one, we can open the roughness. For this one, we can open the normals. And for this one, we can open the displacement. So here you can put everything to raw, except the colors textures. So here for the textures and for the ambient occlusion, you can add an RS color layer. And here you can plug the color texture into the base layer, base color. And here you can plug the ambient occlusion to the layer 1 layer colors. And here you can put that to multiply. Then you can plug that to the base color of the materials. For the roughness, you can plug that to the reflection roughness. For the normal texture, you can add a bump map. And here for the bump map, you can change it from 8 field to tangent space normals, and you can plug that to the bump input. Then for the displacement, you can select the map, and here you can add an RS displacement node. And for this one, we can change the range. So we can keep the minimum value to 0 and 1, and we can change it to minus 0.5 to 0.5. Then you can plug that to the displacement output of the materials. Then we want to control the global scale of each texture on the rocks. So to do that, you can add an RS abs. And here you can plug that to the scale channel of each individual texture. So you can plug that to the general scale. And you can do that for each individual texture node. So here you can take this node and you can put the value to something like 5. And now you can refresh the render view. And now you can see that we have the rocks correctly applied on this object. So if you want to get a bigger pattern, you can decrease this value. So let's put it at 2. And now you can see we have bigger pattern for the rocks. But in my case, I will keep it at 5. So now you can go back to the object level to enable the displacement for these objects. So here you can select the rocks and you can go to the Redshift object tag. So if you don't have this one, you can go to Redshift and you can add the object parameters. So now you can go to tessellation displacements, you can enable this and enable the displacement. And now you can see the displacement value is very strong. So you can go back to the materials and here under the rocks, you can decrease the displacement scale to 0.005. So now let's create the floor materials. So we can go back to the RS mat and here you can select the floor. And here we can put the color quite dark. So you can put the value to something like this. And here you can put the roughness to 1. So now let's create the material for the corals. So we can dive inside the corals materials. And here we can start by creating the bumps for the corals. So to do that, I will add a max on noise. And here for the max on noise, I will change it to box noise. And here you can plug that to the surface just to get a preview of the noise on the corals. And here you can go to the input tab and you can keep it on objects, but you can decrease the scale to 0.1. And now you can see we have this kind of box for the noise. So now let's add a bump map. And here for the bump, you can plug the max on noise to the texture input. And here you can plug that to the bump input of the materials. But here for the bump, you can keep it on 8 fields because we have black and white value as an input. So here you can also decrease 8 because for now it's very high. So you can put the value at 0.005. So now let's add a bit of variation for the roughness value. So to do that, we can add a new max on noise. You can plug the max on noise to the surface. In that case, we can get a preview of the noise. And here we can change the type to Luca. And here you can go to the input tab and you can put the value to 0.2. So now you can add a ramp, RS ramp, and you can plug the noise to the input of the ramp and you can plug that to the reflection roughness. And then you can plug the material back to the surface. And here for the value of the roughness map, we want to get something quite shiny for the corals. So here you can put the minimum value to something like 0.025. And here for the maximum value, you can remap it to something like 0.2. So in that case, we have some quite shiny materials for the corals. So now let's create a new attribute for the corals. So here to do that, you can go back to the object level and here you can go to the render corals. So here instead of doing the materials, we can add a little new attribute. So let's add a connectivity node. So here with the connectivity node, we can create a class attribute for each individual object. And in our case, as we have 41 corals, we have the value for the connectivity going from 0 to 40. So here you can check the value inside the geometry spreadsheet, and you can see that we have the class attribute going from 0 to 40. So with this attribute, we can create a new color node. So maybe you can disable all the objects from this one. So you can click on hide other objects. And here let's add a color node. And here with the color node, you can create a new ramp based on an attribute. So here you can choose the option ramp from attributes. And here you can select the class attributes, and you can put the value from 0 to 40. So now you can see we have black and white value for each individual corals, and we can use this color to multiply another color to get some darker corals and some lighter corals. So now let's visualize the materials, and we can create the materials for the corals. So you can go back to the objects, and you can go to the RS maths under the corals materials. So here let's enable the subsurface for this object. So you can enable the render view. So here you can select the materials, you can go to the subsurface, and you can put the weight at 1. So here for the radius, you can keep it at 1. In that case, we have the white colors. And here for the scale, you can put the value to 1.25. So now let's use an attribute to control the global color for the subsurface. So first, let's add the mask attribute that Philippe showed you how to create it with the corals. So to do that, let's add an RS point attribute to import the attribute from the subs to these materials. And here we can use the mask attribute created with Philippe on the first tutorials. So now let's add an RS ramp. And here you can put that to the surface. And here for the ramp, you can choose the color. So in my case, I will put a green color to this one. So maybe I can choose a green to something like here. Maybe you can put it slightly more bluish like this. For the end color, I will choose something like blue. And for the mid color, I will add an orange to maybe something like here. And I will add an orange color. So now I have remapped the mask attribute with this ramp color. Of course, you can choose another color if you want. And now you can plug the material back to the surface. And you can use this attribute to control the global color for the subsurface. So here you can plug that to the MS colors, which is the input for the color of the subsurface. And now you can see we have this result. But now we want to create the darker corals with the attribute we have created before. So to do that, let's add an RS color user data. In that case, it will import the color attribute into these materials. And now let's add a color layer. So you can plug the ramp to the base layer, base color. And you can plug this black and white attribute to the layer 1 layer colors. And then you can plug that to the MS colors. So now you can multiply the ramp with the black and white value. In that case, we have darker corals and we have some lighter corals. So let's put that to multiply. So that's pretty much it for the colors. So now let's add some emissions on the corals. So here you can select the emissions value and you can put the value to 0.5. So now we have this result. Of course, we want to remap the emissions. So here we want to take the mask attribute. So we can copy and paste this just to get the mask attribute from here. And we can control the emission with the attribute. So basically the mask attribute is going from 0 to 1 for each individual corals. So then you can add a ramp to remap it. So let's add a new RS ramp. And here for the ramp, we can invert the ramp. In that case, we can invert the attribute. Now you can get a preview of this attribute by plugging that to the surface. And now you can see we have the white color at the bottom of each individual corals. In that case, we can put the emission only at the bottom of each individual pieces. So now we want to add a bit of noise to this part for the emissions. So let's add the max on noise. And here for the max on noise, you can change the type to Luca. And here you can go to the input and you can put the value to 0.25. So now we want to add the noise only at the bottom of this attribute. So to do that, let's add a new color layer. And here you can plug that to the base layer, base color. And here you can plug the noise to the layer 1 layer colors. So now let's check the result of this ramp. So you can plug that to the surface. And here on the RS color layer, you can put that to multiply. And now you can see we have added a bit of noise to this white color. In that case, we have something a bit more organic for the emissions. So now let's add a ramp. And here you can remap these attributes. So here you can keep the first color to black and you can put the second color to something like pink. So here you can select the white spot and here you can replace the color with something like this. And in that case, we have a pink colors. So then you can plug the ramp to the emission color. So you can plug that to the emission color input of the materials and you can plug that back to the surface. So now I have this result for the corals and I've just made some change of my main ramp here. So this is the base color for the corals. You can relimit colors, corals. So in that case, you can change this ramp to get different results. And also if you want, you can add an RS color correct just after the ramp. And here you can plug that here. So if you want, you can change the U shift just to change the color like this. But in my case, I will keep it to 0. In that case, I keep my original ramp. So now let's create the lightning for the scenes. So you can go back to the object and here you can disable the RS light dome. So you can put that to off. And now let's add an RS light And here for this light, you can keep it on area light and you can put the intensity to 5. And here you can change the size to something like 3 on the y-axis, and you can decrease it to 0.5 on the x-axis. And you can decrease the spread to a very low value, something like 0.0. So let's say 0.1 for now. And here you can put that to the side and you can select the light 1. And here you can click on the lock icon to place the light correctly. So press H to center the light on the scenes. And here you can put the light to something like here. Of course, it's up to you. You can play with the light intensity and also with the spread value. So maybe you can go for something like this. And now you can put the spread value to 0.075. And here you can put the intensity to 10. Or maybe you can just put that to 0.15 or 0.2, 0.1. Yeah, I think something like this. And you can decrease it to maybe 7 or maybe 6. And here, if you want, you can add a bit of blue to the floor. So you can select the floor, and here you can add a bit of blue, and you can put the saturation to something like that. And here you can select the floor object, and you can put it to 0.05 or 0.02. So that's pretty much it for the look dev of the scenes. If you want, you can download this final project file for free on the website. So you can find the link in the descriptions. So don't forget to give a follow and give a thank you to Philip to create this scene for us on the channels. So I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye. That's it for today, guys. You can check out our website to get some premium courses, tutorials, project file, Houdini tools, and more. So check it out with the link in the descriptions.